Good evening and aloha. I'm U.S. Congressman Ed Case. I'm coming to you live from my district office in downtown Honolulu. And I'm really honored and happy to be joined tonight by my colleague and full partner in the U.S. House representing all of our Hawaii, Congressman Kaiali'i Kahele, who is coming to you live from his district office in Hilo. So from one end of the state to almost the other, here we are, both of you are U.S. congressmen in a joint talk story. And that's what we're trying to do tonight. We're trying to run a joint community meeting with you to, number one, update you on our work on behalf of Hawaii and our country in Congress. Number two, to listen to your thoughts. And then number three, to answer your questions. And I'm going to turn this over to Congressman Kaiali'i Kahele, who has only been in office for 7+ months, but already has made such a huge contribution to Hawaii. He came in just prepped from the get-go. He was like I said earlier, my full partner from the get-go. He got two great committees in the U.S. House, which he'll talk to you about: the Committee on Armed Services and the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, and has developed really positive relationships across all of the House. So it's really a pleasure for me to have him with me in the House. And with that, Congressman Kelly, I turn it over to you.
Well, mahalo nui loa, Congressman Case, for that warm introduction. And it's been an honor of mine to work with you now for the past 212 days in Congress. I took office on January 3rd, 2021, and it's been nothing like I would have ever imagined. But the opportunity to prepare for the 117th Congress with your early guidance has really helped, and it's been my honor to work with you. We worked on many issues together concerning our constituents, the people of Hawaii, and our families. We're going to talk about those tonight. Right now, this is August, and the congressional calendar, historically, this is the August recess. It's a time when we go back to our districts, we go back to our communities, and we get an opportunity to hear from the people that we have the privilege to serve before we go back to Washington, D.C. after Labor Day to continue the work of the Congress before the holidays. Just like you had mentioned earlier, I represent the 2nd Congressional District. That includes the rural part of the island of Oahu and the rest of the state of Hawaii. As you know, since I assumed office, Congressman Case and I have met every week. And I think that's really important for our constituents and the people of Hawaii to know that we have a very good, solid, close working relationship, not only at the member level, but also at the staff level. Both of our DC and Hawaii offices meet often. Congressman Case and I meet weekly, and we try and stick to that. It's easy to move schedules around and cancel that, but we really make a commitment to meet weekly wherever we are, to keep each other informed, to hold each other accountable, and to have that shared commitment to the people of Hawaii. That wealth of knowledge, the patience and the experience that we have been able to receive from Congressman Case's office has allowed my staff to grow, and it's greatly appreciated. With that being said, I'm looking forward to jumping into this virtual town hall tonight, and I really want to mahalo everyone here who have joined us online this evening. Look forward to your questions, and mahalo nui loa for taking the time out of your busy evening. I know this is a Thursday evening. It's dinner time. Everyone's home with their families, but we really appreciate the opportunity to spend a little bit of time with you this evening to share with you, what we've done for the people of Hawaii over the last 7 months, and how we can continue to make your lives better in the United States Congress for the remainder of the 117th Congress. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it back and yield back to Congressman Case, who will transition into general thoughts on the 117th Congress. Mahalo.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Congressman. I really appreciate your comments about teamwork. That's what it takes. We only have 4 members of Congress: 2 senators, 2 representatives. And if those 4 members aren't connected, trying to accomplish things together, it can get bad pretty fast. But that hasn't happened at all. Congressional delegation has always realized that they needed to work together. This particular delegation, not only do Congressman Kahele and I meet weekly, but the entire delegation meets on a regular basis as well. And we all try to keep in touch with each other across the House and the Senate. So to Senators Schatz and Hirono, this is certainly part of your talk story as well, although you're back in the Senate right now working. Let me talk about the 117th Congress to date. And again, just to kind of get everybody on the same page, our country operates in two-year Congresses. We've been doing that ever since our first Congress way back in the 1700s. And this is the 117th time that Congress has come together for a two-year Congress. We have the first session, which is the first year, the second session, which is the second year. Every Congress, you have to kind of start anew with your legislation, but obviously the things that you're focused on can continue from Congress to Congress. And of course, stuff like COVID-19 doesn't care what Congress you're in. And so the challenges are always there. Members come in, a new Congress brings new members. Some people leave, some people come in. So you need to develop the new relationships all over again. And that's really critical in the first 6 months of a Congress. And Congressman Kahele has certainly been doing that with many people throughout Congress, but even me, who know a lot of members of Congress already, who knew them from my prior service, 03 to 07, many of whom are now leaders in Congress. So that's been a good connection to have, but also just members that I came in with the second time. I still have to get to know a brand new class of members of Congress. And so certainly that's been part of the first few months of this 117th Congress. But to the huge issue that we all face, COVID-19 is and will remain our number one challenge in the 117th Congress. COVID-19 started in the last Congress. We're into the 18th month of a pandemic. We're into the 18th month of incredible tragedy. We have had somewhere around 36 million cases of COVID-19 throughout our country, and we're not even talking about the world. We have now seen 615,000 of our fellow citizens die of COVID-19. We are into the third wave of this pandemic. The first wave, of course, in the first months of 2020, the second wave in the summer of 2020. And as we worked out of that during the rest of 2020, we thought things were getting good, getting stabilized. And then two things happened. The first thing that happened was that we had the Delta variant, far more contagious, far more dangerous than the initial COVID strain that hit us so hard last year. And second, we let our guard down. We didn't take the public health advice. We felt like we could somehow kind of skate through this without everybody trying to get vaccinated and protecting each other. Certainly, I think that we let the guard down in much of the country in terms of the conditions that we had put in place. And we are getting hit, of course, we all know, very hard today in our own Hawaii, over 600 cases, the largest single day since COVID started. And by the way, let's just be really clear from the get-go here. That is us, the residents of Hawaii, mostly getting infected. So it is not, it is not the tourists that are coming in infected and giving it to everybody else. It is something that is circulating relatively internally here in Hawaii, which is of great concern. And so, although we have one of the highest levels of vaccinations in the entire country, still we're not immune from this, and we are seeing that. We have dealt with COVID-19 at the federal level throughout the last 116th Congress and continuing into the current 117th Congress. We have passed three major measures of emergency assistance, totaling some $5+ trillion of federal assistance. I think everybody's familiar, the business assistance through the Paycheck Protection Program and other small business oriented assistance, the direct economic impact payments to many citizens a number of times, unemployment insurance, supplementation, and then finally aid to our state and local governments to help out, which they are still in the process of distributing in one way, shape, or form. And this $5 trillion has been aimed both at the public health side of COVID-19 as well as the economic dislocation side of COVID-19, where of course we've been hit so hard right here in Hawaii because of its impact on travel and tourism in particular, but also the community and social side of COVID-19, the eviction moratoriums that we had in place and will now continue under the Centers for Disease Prevention and Control's most recent extension. And so certainly this is the number one area that we all have to continue to focus on is COVID-19, the public health side, the economic side, the social disruption side. That's predominant and will remain that way in the 117th Congress. Aside from COVID-19, for myself, one of my principal activities is my Appropriations Committee. The Appropriations Committee is the oldest committee in the U.S. House, and it's the committee that is responsible for all federal funding, some $1.5 trillion per year. Every year before the start of the next fiscal year for our federal government, which starts on October 1st, we come together for a number of months in the Appropriations Committee and essentially consider all of the requests for funding for that year from the president in the president's budget, from our own colleagues, and the needs of the country. And we come up with 12 separate measures for all of the federal government, ranging from education to labor to social services to foreign affairs, transportation, to anything else the federal government does. This has occupied a great deal of my time in the first months of this 117th Congress, because that's really when the Appropriations Committee does our work. We reported all 12 bills after a number of weeks of just day to night meetings during a prior district work period. When other people were back in the district, we were back in Washington getting those bills done. We have just completed all of those bills and have passed most of them out of the United States House. They are now in the U.S. Senate. These are major bills for Hawaii in particular. Anything that in Hawaii the federal government touches is impacted by appropriations, to include not only assistance to travel and tourism, but to our number two economic generator, the national defense effort in Hawaii, which had we not had that as well during the very difficult time of COVID-19, we would have been in even deeper kimchi as we saw travel and tourism go down. So our defense effort here really pulled us through in many ways. I spent a lot of time on that to try to make sure that defense is adequately funded here, but a number of other areas that perhaps I'll get into a little bit later on. Two more things, and I'm going to turn it back to Congressman Kahele to note. Number one, of course, we are in the middle of a major deliberations over the largest infrastructure package that our country has ever undertaken. The president has made certain proposals to Congress in the trillions of dollars. The president and a number of folks in both the House and the Senate have tried to work towards a bipartisan bill that could actually pass Congress, which is the goal here. The goal here is to get something that passes Congress and can get to the president's desk and be signed by the president. The bill that is being negotiated or deliberated on in the U.S. Senate right now is over $1 trillion of infrastructure. And this is not traditional infrastructure, although that's critically needed. Roads, harbors, airports, water lines, sewers, et cetera. But infrastructure in a broader sense, the one area that I would note in particular that I think is most critical for Hawaii is broadband. Because too much of our state still just lacks basic broadband. We saw that happen during COVID-19. Today, we depend on broadband for distance learning, but also telemedicine, which we used so extensively during COVID-19. And so the opportunities for us to get some real federal help to really take broadband throughout this entire state is an exciting one that I think we need to pursue. And then finally, I would note that here in Hawaii, of course, we're in the Indo-Pacific. We're in the broader community of the Pacific. We are closely linked with the countries of Asia and the Pacific and even beyond, countries like India. that in one way, shape, or form have major efforts in the Pacific. And here in Hawaii, we are really, in many ways, the center of our country's efforts in the Pacific, whether it be defense or other areas, foreign policy, gathering people from other countries at places like the East-West Center, at the Asia Pacific Center for Security Studies, where we facilitate really an international effort to cooperate in the Pacific. This is an area that has certainly consumed a lot of my time as well. That is not only what we should be doing for our country as we look to China, and I'll get perhaps into China a little bit more, but as China seeks really in many ways to dominate the Pacific, to include up to our doorstep and perhaps even us. Of course, I'm sure China would like to kind of determine the history of our state. I don't think we're going to let that happen, but that's their ambition. And we have to address that as a practical matter. But not just that, but the many relationships that we have throughout the Pacific Islands, our cultural and ethnic heritage, so much of it right here in Hawaii. We have a role to play for our country. But as we play that role for our country and for our world, it also helps us back at home with our own economy. So in the area of continuing to try to diversify our travel and tourism industry, there's much we can do at the federal level that will help us to do so as we look to our role in the Indo-Pacific. With that, I will turn it back over to you, Congressman Kahele, for your own thoughts on the big picture of the 117th Congress.
Great. Well, mahalo, Congressman Case, for that. And, I think, like you articulated, the 117th Congress for me has been dominated by, COVID-19 and how the federal government is approaching dealing with the coronavirus, something that we've been now dealing with for over a year and a half. Like you said earlier today, recorded a record 655 new COVID cases, 166 hospitalizations, and a positivity rate of 6.9%. Here on Hawaii Island, we had 131 of those cases, and we have an 8.35% positivity rate. And so COVID is still something that is very much here in our community. The Delta variant is the predominant variant for the COVID-19 strain across the United States. As of mid-July, 82% of all COVID-19 cases in the nation were as a result of the Delta variant. And so it's something that we need to take very, very seriously. It's a viral variant. It's much more contagious. It accounts for the most disease transmission, and it represents a dire health risk to unvaccinated individuals. And it's now endangering many regions throughout the United States. For myself personally, I chose to get vaccinated, not just for my wife, my kids, my family, my mom, but also community members and my kupuna and our kupuna who are elderly and immunocompromised. And so if there's one thing that I want to make sure I foot stomp tonight is to please get vaccinated. The vaccines are widely available throughout Hawaii, and of course, it's a choice you have to make, and you make with your doctor. If you're concerned about the vaccine, reach out to your doctor or a trusted nurse and try to do the best research you can and make the best decision you can for your family. But at the end of the day, I really want to emphasize to everyone to get the vaccine, and it's really, really important with the very deadly Delta variant that is spreading throughout our community, and is I think why through complacency we've seen a spike in COVID cases across not just the state, but throughout the country as well. And so that is what has really taken up a lot of our time over the course of the last 212 days. While in the Congress, I had an opportunity to be a part of the American Rescue Plan, which was a significant federal piece of legislation that allocated billions and over $1 trillion to different states across the country to deal with COVID-19. One of the things that I'm very proud of in the American Rescue Plan, and I'll talk about one of those things, is the child tax credit that we included in the American Rescue Plan. Many of you with children have been receiving the child tax credit as of a few weeks ago. And although the child tax credit is a temporary provision, it has the potential to cut child poverty in half. In Hawaii, a stunning 83.4% of children in our district will benefit from the expanded and improved child tax credit. That equates to about 135,000 children across the state. The average benefit for over 36,000 households is about $2,900. It's going to help families, especially those families with children in poverty, get out of poverty, and it's going to help at least 2,900 children in our district get out of that deep poverty. So that's something that I'm really proud of that we were able to do, and I hope that we can make that child tax credit permanent moving forward. One of the things I focused on in the appropriations process, and we're still working on in the Congress, is on the agriculture side of the house. I've had an opportunity to lead efforts to increase funding for specialty crops, for infrastructure, for organic agriculture and nutrition programs, and rural housing and development programs, and a broad range of integrated area-wide pest management issues that we've been dealing with. Here on Hawaii Island, where coffee is a big part of our agriculture industry, as it is on Kauai and on other islands across Hawaii, but really important here for Hawaii's agriculture industry, we've been dealing with the coffee berry borer and the coffee leaf rust. And so I've really focused on, even though I don't serve on the Agriculture Committee, I've really focused on how we can help our agriculture industry through the Coffee Plant Health Initiative, through the Macadamia Tree Health Initiative, and through doing whatever we can to strengthen local processing and to help smaller livestock processors throughout the state compete for competitive grants, and also how we can work together through the Flexible Financing for Rural America program, which can help rural energy cooperatives on their consumer debt and utility service providers that are unable to refinance loans from the USDA. So I've really focused on agriculture and diversifying Hawaii's economy from our historically tourism and military economic drivers, and we've put a lot of work into that. So I'm going to save a few of my things that we've worked on for a couple of slides that I have after Congressman Cases additional things that he wants to talk about, and then I'll bring up a couple of slides that we can discuss. But at this point, let me turn it back to Congressman Case so we can do that and we can get to your questions.
Thanks, Congressman Kahele. And what's quite interesting, and I think people should know, is that Kai and I coordinate on our appropriations requests. Not only do we talk back and forth about bills that we can co-sponsor, but when the time comes to actually try to seek federal funding in various areas, we talk back and forth about what exactly we think we need and how to get it, and which of us is best positioned to really lead something in particular. So, if it's a funding issue that's important, especially to Congressman Kahele's district, and it's an Appropriations Committee issue, I'm going to try to push that one through for Hawaii. And if it's transportation and infrastructure related, that relates perhaps even more so to the first congressional district, my district, than the second, Congressman Kahele is going to try to help get that one done. So we're just far better off if we are in constant communication, coordinating on the specific efforts that we want. And I think that is borne out by some of the results in appropriations, excuse me, that we have been successful at so far. I'll just give you a little bit of a sampling of some of the areas that we are focusing on, again, on the appropriation side. In the agriculture area, Kai mentioned the coffee leaf rust, which has been so devastating to our coffee industry. We have comparable concerns with some of our other major specialty crops, such as macadamia nuts, which have their own challenge going. But in the agriculture area, we also have some very, very specific education grants that facilitate education throughout our state that we have been able to fund in a way that is specific to Hawaii. In the commerce and justice and science area, which is critical here in Hawaii, we get a huge amount of money for really ocean and atmospheric related research that funds many good jobs through the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which pairs up really with the University of Hawaii in many ways to offer really world-leading research. We try to fund that through the appropriations process. I talked about defense. One area that we believe, I think I can speak for both of us, is necessary for Hawaii is a state-of-the-art homeland defense radar, which we have also tried to fund together with our colleagues in the Senate and have been successful thus far. We have tried to fund federal programs that accelerate renewable energy research and development through the energy part of appropriations. That is something, of course, that we desperately need here in Hawaii, where we have some of the highest energy prices based on fossil fuels in the entire world, and we need to continue that transfer and transition over to renewable energy. The federal government offers a lot of funding in that area. That also assists us from an economic development perspective, because jobs are created and maintained, good, solid paying jobs in the research and development area. It helps our university as well. In homeland security, one of the continuing issues we always have is trying to make sure that people can get in and through our airports as easily as possible. That helps not only us locally, but also our travel and tourism industry. So we try to fund the TSA and keep the CSA, fully resourced. In the area of interior, the Interior Department, we try to fund our precious natural resources to make sure that our national parks, for example, both of which are in Congressman Kahele's districts, but help the entire state. Not only do we like to enjoy that, but of course that's part of our visitor industry. We have tried to maintain that funding. We have major investments in military construction. I'm on that subcommittee where I'm now pretty senior on that subcommittee. And I spend a lot of time trying to make sure that our military facilities are up to par. We have major investments going on at places like Schofield Barracks, the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, the Kaneohe Bay Marine Corps facility, where they really need to upgrade many of their most basic facilities, things like enlisted and officer quarters, hangars, you name it. These run into the really into the hundreds of millions and even billions of dollars. And of course, that not only helps our defense effort, but it provides very good, solid paying jobs for those that work in construction here in Hawaii and at the Pearl Harbor Naval Shipyard, which is our largest industrial employer, which is right in the middle of my district at Pearl Harbor. I also have in that committee our Veterans Affairs matters, and of course our veterans communities throughout Hawaii. We have one of the highest pro rata populations of veterans and their families of any state in the entire country, because not only do we serve in the military, as does Congressman Kahele, but also many of our military families choose to stay here after their service. And so these veterans facilities are critical to that community, not just Tripler, but we have both tried very hard, for example, to make sure that the newest veterans facility in Hawaii, the Aloha project, the advanced leeward outpatient facility that will be constructed out near UH West Oahu and in Kapolei, is actually fully funded and constructed. In the state and foreign ops area of appropriations, I spoke earlier about the great facilities that we have here that are central to our country's effort in the Indo-Pacific and are really gathering places, if I can put it that way, for many, many leaders and others from throughout our world that come to Hawaii to try to solve many of the problems of the Indo-Pacific and even of the world. And again, so we're talking about the East-West Center, which receives a major federal funding, as well as other facilities that may not be as well known as the East-West Center, but are still equally critical to that effort. Again, these also provide good, solid paying jobs here in Hawaii. And then finally, transportation, housing, and urban development, where we have major block grants, large amounts that come to Hawaii to help us with our infrastructure needs. And I guess I shouldn't have said finally, because the last area is really in health and human services and education. And in that area, the funding that we try to maintain and increase from year to year is funding not just generally in those areas, but for our Native Hawaiian programs, where we have longstanding federal laws and programs that assist our Native Hawaiian community with health, with education, with business development, with housing. And these programs need to be maintained and funded from year to year, and the needs are great. So that's a little bit of an overview of appropriations. I think I'll just stop there and turn it back to you for a little while, Congressman.
Okay, great. Sounds good. I'm gonna display a few slides, and let's go to the next slide. Okay, so first and foremost, want to make sure that everyone has the right information to contact my office and who you can reach out to in both DC and Hawaii. In Washington, D.C., my Chief of Staff is Christy Wagner. Here in Hawaii, my Deputy Chief of Staff is Ikaika Mahoe. In Washington, D.C., our Legislative Director in charge of our policy shop is Kana Smith. Michael An and Roz Makaula, they are our DC and Hawaii Communications Directors. And here at our district office in Hilo, Hawaii, is Jasmine Bronco as our office manager, and then Hanale Lilo is our Director of Constituent Services. A couple different things I've done. As you're a member of Congress, I relocated the flagship 2nd Congressional District Office from the island of Oahu here to Hawaii Island and to my hometown of Hilo. And so I'm sitting right now in Hilo, Hawaii, in my district office, which is just in front of the Hilo Lagoon Center and right across from the state courthouse, for those of you familiar with downtown Hilo. The other thing I did was I utilized 4 of the part-time positions that are allocated to my congressional office to field representatives on the islands of Lanai, Molokai, Maui, and Kauai. So we have 4 field reps that represent the 2nd Congressional District on those individual islands. And so if you have any issues, Mike Contrades on Kauai, Gene Ross Davis on the island of Molokai, Stephanie Ohigashi on Maui, and Joel Aokiaki on the island of Lanai can coordinate any issues you might have. And then there are our DC and Hawaii District Office addresses. And please follow us at Rep Kahele or at kahele.house.gov. Sign up for our newsletter, which we put out right about the 1st of every single month, and you'll be able to receive that and see what we're doing back in DC and here at the district office in Hawaii for you. Next slide. Committees and caucuses, I already talked about those. House Armed Services Committee and the 2 subcommittees I'm on are the Tactical Airline and Readiness subcommittees, and then the House T&I Committee. Really important for the bipartisan infrastructure bill that is currently being in final negotiations in the U.S. Senate. Congressman Cases and I will be expecting that bill over in the House probably in a few weeks. But on those T&I committee, I serve on the subcommittees of Aviation and Highways and Transit, 2 really important subcommittees for Hawaii. As far as caucuses go, I'm a member of the Progressive Caucus, CAPAC, Asian Pacific American Caucus, where I am a member of the leadership team on CAPAC. I'm also a member of a couple different caucuses that are bipartisan, the 4-country caucus being one of those. I serve together on the Pacific Islands Caucus, which Congressman Cases is a founding member of that caucus, and proud to serve with the other insular and U.S. territory members across the Pacific on that caucus. I see some Medicaid questions and CNMI questions, and we'll be able to answer those tonight as well. Next slide. As far as constituent outreach and services update. In the last 212 days, my office has responded to over 30,000 constituent letters with an average response time of about 9 days. I personally look over every single response that goes out to your constituent letters and emails that we receive, and we're really proud that we've gotten caught up on those, and we're getting those with a timely response and a meaningful response to your issues. As far as casework, we try our best to address all casework issues within the first 48 hours, and our office has closed 650 official casework inquiries that has come into our office since we took office. And what's really important about that is just because you send me an email or reach out on Instagram or Facebook or some social media platform, in order to really have a case looked at, you need to go through our district office, our casework team, which Hanalei Liloy manages, and you need to fill out the personal disclosure form that allows us to look into your personal case and issue so that we can appropriately work on that. And so would just want to stress that as well. As far as constituent interactions, myself or my staff have attended over 120 community meetings, and I'm really proud that our Oahu staff and our team of hardworking interns have attended every neighborhood board in the 2nd Congressional District on the island of Oahu since we took office. And we have representation there. We're on the agenda. We provide a timely response for every question that we get asked. And that's something that we've really worked hard to do, is to be on every neighborhood board meeting on Oahu. As far as island district visits, Congressman Case left out the fact that he is, and he won't say it, but I'll say it, he's the only member of Congress ever in the history of the state of Hawaii to represent both the 1st and the 2nd Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives. So he knows how challenging it is to represent the 2nd Congressional District, which encompasses the entire state of Hawaii. In my last 6-7 months in office, I've had a chance to go to Maui and Lanai and Molokai and Oahu and Kauai. I've gone to every island but Molokai, but we are going to go to Molokai in a few weeks before the end of August. And so by the end of August, we will have gone to every island for extensive site visits throughout the 2nd Congressional District. And that's a really important opportunity for us to really understand the different challenges on the different islands. Next slide. Community funded projects. This is something that was new in the 117 Congress. I'm sure Congressman Case will talk about some of the ones that he worked on. But for my office specifically, in the appropriations bills, that the majority of them have been already moved out of its I guess committees of jurisdiction and have been brought to the House floor, is about $5.8 million. $1 million for the Boys and Girls Club of the Big Island for a Keaupuna Youth Development Community Center, $1.2 million for the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement for their Trades and Entrepreneurship program, $1 million to Hana Health on Maui for a Rehabilitation and Support Center, $650,000 for the Kauai Creative Technology Center over on West Kauai, $100,000 for the Kaohi program on Molokai, $1 million for the Miloli'i Community Enrichment and Historical Center in South Kona, and finally $896,000 for Ma'o Organic Farms on the Leeward Coast on the island of Oahu. So these are community-funded projects that will be flowing into our communities. These projects, and I'm sure like Congressman Case will talk about his, are really important for this point and space in time because of the lack of general fund revenues to the state of Hawaii. The state legislature was unable to provide really critical grant and aid programs that the state historically appropriates every legislative session to worthy nonprofits all over the state. And they didn't give out any grant and aids this past legislative session to nonprofits. And so these community funded projects that Congressman Case and I were able to champion and work on will help those nonprofits and critical services that they provide to our communities. Next slide. I think this is my final slide. These are some appropriations for Hawaii that I work really hard on. Congressman Case sits on the Appropriations Committee, so his representation on a very, very important committee for Hawaii, has been critical to getting many of these programs approved because he is that voice, and he's at that table when many of these appropriations requests come to the Appropriations Committee and the various subcommittees of jurisdiction. But these are some that I wanted to highlight. I talked about agriculture earlier, money for Native American programs that eventually get to our Native Hawaiian programs and our SBA 8A development programs. There's programs and funding for Native Hawaiian healthcare, Papalokahi, and the different Native Hawaiian healthcare island systems that make up the Native Hawaiian Healthcare Act and Papalokahi. There's money for Native Hawaiian education programs that get administered through the state of Hawaii that help programs like Punana Leo and our University of Hawaii at Hilo and Manoa Native Hawaiian education programs. There's money for housing and urban development for the Native Hawaiian Housing Block Grant Program, the HUD VASH program, HUD VASH, which helps houseless veterans and provides them housing vouchers so that they can have housing that they can live in. Money for the East-West Center, that's really important for that program, and we've consistently always funded the East-West Center, and so that was an important appropriation. And then finally, one of the things that I was able to work on was a veterinary treatment facility program at Hickam Air Force Base, just under $29 million for that program. So these are just some of the many appropriations projects and programs that our office was able to get into the appropriations bill. And I think it goes back to the teamwork that Congressman Cases and I talked about. We're both Hawaii in the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate is very well positioned, but with my representation on the House Armed Services and the T&I Committee, and Congressman Cases' representation on the Natural Resources Committee, which has a very important role for the Native Hawaiian community, but more importantly, his position on the Appropriations Committee puts us in a very strong position to fight for every federal resource and every federal dollar for the state of Hawaii and the districts that we represent. Is that the last slide? Yes, mahalo. Okay, so those are my slides, and I'll turn it back to Congressman Cases.
Mahalo. I think I often think about my congressional duties as being in really three buckets. So the first bucket is our responsibility to help lead our country. So the larger issues of our country, our contribution to the direction of our country, whether it be COVID-19 responses or how to deal with China or any number of other issues that we face in Congress every day. The second bucket is about helping our Hawaii wherever we can. Both Congressman Kahele and I have really focused a lot of our report back to you on that aspect, whether it be appropriations or community project funding or some of our other efforts that are really more about making sure that our federal government works for us here in Hawaii. And then the third area is really about helping our individual constituents, and Kai spoke to that in some of the areas that he discussed when he talked about casework, which is our individual efforts on your behalf. My office is completely open and accessible to the folks in the 1st Congressional District to help you with your individual concerns. A lot of times it's just a simple question, but a lot of times it's more complicated than that. The areas that we get a lot of questions on from that perspective are, for example, unemployment insurance, which remains a state program. So that's been very frustrating, in all honesty, because it's not a federal program, and yet it's been so critical to so many out there. But we still try to answer your questions and get an answer from the state if you're not getting an answer. Other areas are immigration, which is definitely a federal program, passports, which is definitely a federal program, veterans and Social Security benefits, a huge part of our casework. Again, for information, there in contacts, case.house.gov. One thing that we are really honored to be able to do is to recognize the folks from Hawaii that have succeeded so well on the national and the international stage. And so, if you have a couple of those pictures that we took today, can you put them up right now to my staff? I hope they're there. Maybe not. So I will just try. I have to describe to you that today today, Congressman Kahele and I, we were not able to do this personally because of COVID-19 restrictions, but of course, Olympic gold medal surfing championship champion Carissa Moore returned to Hawaii and was honored in the governor's office today. And we were able to present to her through the governor a special certificate of congressional congratulations. Just so proud of her to have her back. There's the picture right there, and that's our certificate. And that just gives us incredible pleasure to have really the U.S. Congress through us be able to contribute to so much of what she's been able to do and make us all proud. So it kind of chokes me up, but she's an amazing person, and she's the Olympic gold medalist, and to have that come from Hawaii for the first time with all of our history right here is something that I think moves us all, unifies us all, I could say. The other thing I did today, I think it illustrates a little bit of the job that I try to do in terms of helping Hawaii in Congress, and that is always interacting with our fellow elected officials here in Hawaii. Both Congressman Kahele and I represent about 750,000 people each. And as he pointed out, that's on a number of islands. I have Honolulu, so 15 miles one way, 15 miles the other way is a little easier logistically. But we have to rely on our partners in state and county government to try to feed us information and to point out to us areas that they think are important for us to focus on. And then our job is to try to figure out how to help them and help our constituencies. And so, for example, just this morning, I spent three hours with Honolulu City Council Chair Tommy Waters, who represents 100,000 people with me in East Honolulu, all the way from Makapu'u Point, all the way through East Honolulu, as far as Wilhelmina Rise and Waikiki. Tommy has all of Waikiki. And so we drove around today and simply tried to talk story about what he thought were important issues. Here's some pictures and just kind of run through them. Here we are at, first of all, Sandy Beach, trying to figure out how to preserve that incredible coastline. At Hanauma Bay right here, talking about marine conservation. And then on from there to the Maunalua Fish Pond, which is right there below Hawaii Loa Ridge. Incredible restoration effort. On from there, we went to Ainahaina, where we went up to the top of Ainahaina and met with residents to talk about flooding in Wailupe Stream, get it on site. So in other words, I'm not in Washington, D.C. I'm here trying to figure it out with them, and then try to think to myself, well, how can I translate this into action? From there, we went on down to Waikiki, where we spoke about critical beach restoration efforts that are needed in Waikiki, as well as to try to understand how we could help our tourism industry. And then finally, we laid a wreath down there to really honor the folks that were in Waikiki long before the tourists were here in Hawaii. And so that was just my morning this morning, but it was invaluable for me to stay in touch with my fellow elected officials. And I got a long laundry list of stuff I got to take back to DC now and work it through. Okay, Congressman Kahele, a little bit more from you, or do you want to just go to your questions? Because I think we're kind of at the time when we should turn it over to our listeners.
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, we can jump to questions.
Do you want to take one? We'll just tag team back and forth. I got my list and you got yours.
Yeah, sure. And we're trying to pull as much as we can from here. One question talked about the cesspool situation throughout the state, and if there were any updates to possible solutions. This was something that I didn't expect to be a big part of my work in this first 6-7 months of the Congress. But on the T&I committee, I had an opportunity to address this particular issue after doing and being invited to and making a site visit to the East Hawaii wastewater treatment facility here in Hilo. And so taking that information and working together with the subcommittee on jurisdiction for cesspools and clean water issues throughout the country, we were able to work on the House Clean Water State Revolving Fund and I was able to get $50 million into the House infrastructure bill to address the cesspool issues. And so this bill passed the U.S. House. It was included this $50 million to address cesspools to the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. Was passed by the U.S. House in the Invest in America Act, which is basically the House infrastructure bill. This was direct action of advocacy on behalf of myself and my staff in ensuring that cesspools are included in any type of clean water legislation. In addition, my staff has been working together with county officials and the EPA to increase the availability of funds to address this particular issue. You know, as most of you probably know, the state legislature a few years ago passed a law to eliminate all cesspools across the state of Hawaii. It doesn't take effect until about 2040, 2050. That's a ways away from now. But the goal is to eliminate the about 90,000 cesspools that exist throughout the state, the majority of which exist here on Hawaii Island. That comes at a cost, because if any of you out there have had to get a new house construction, or you did a remodeling permit and were required to put in a septic tank, you know that can cost anywhere between $8 to $15, maybe even up to $20,000 to convert to a septic tank and a leach field. So trying to get federal funding to help local county municipalities modernize their wastewater treatment facilities, connect more people to the wastewater system, get people off of cesspools, and help those that in our rural and geographically challenged communities to convert to a septic tank and find the federal resources to do that was something that my office worked on through the infrastructure bill. So we're working on it, and thanks so much for that question. And I guess, Congressman Case, we'll just go back and forth.
Yep.
Okay, go
Sounds
for
good.
it.
I got one here. What are your thoughts about the bipartisan infrastructure bill that is now before the Senate? I spoke to that a little bit earlier on. I support the bipartisan infrastructure bill. First of all, I support a major investment in infrastructure. I support the largest investment in infrastructure in our nation's history, and this bill does represent that. There are other proposals that are larger, and there are other proposals that are smaller. For me, what this comes down to is our nation's infrastructure is crumbling, whether it be our roads, our sewers, our schools, our broadband, our airports are right across the road. And we need that kind of investment, reinvestment in our country, really, to not only keep our country strong and functioning, but to compete out there in the world. But you've got to get stuff through Congress. And in all honesty, there are many of our colleagues in Congress that either don't believe in an infrastructure bill, or if they believe in it, they believe in a much smaller version of the infrastructure bill. And so you've got to find a way to pass stuff through Congress. The Senate is split exactly 50-50. The House is virtually split. There are not many more Democrats than Republicans. So although Democrats are in the majority, it's a very, very slim majority, and the options to pass things through Congress on a completely unified Democratic perspective in both the House and the Senate are very, very narrow. And so this is an opportunity for us to try to come together and kind of get beyond the partisanship and do the right thing for the country. The president has advocated for a bipartisan infrastructure bill since even before he was sworn in. He has worked hard to hold that together. He's brought the two sides to the White House to negotiate where those negotiations seem to be breaking down. He's held this one together. They came to an agreement in principle. They're working through it in the Senate right now, which is a tough place to get anything passed now on a 50-50 split. And I think the country wants its government to work. So this is not just about infrastructure. This is also about, can we actually figure out a way to get stuff done that is for the common good of the American people, and kind of set some of that partisanship aside. And so there's a lot invested in this bill that is being deliberated deliberated on in the Senate. And we're both very hopeful that they'll get it done by the end of this week and it'll be back in the House. Now, we did pass out our own infrastructure bill, as Congressman Kahele pointed out. And that's over in the Senate, and hopefully a lot of that is in what the Senate is debating, and we'll conclude hopefully very, very soon, and then we'll get it back. But so my thoughts to answer your question in a very long way, but to simplify it, I support that effort, and I hope very much to be able to take it up in the House, and as Congressman Kahele said, in the next 1 or 2 weeks, and get it passed and get it to the president's desk and prove to the American people that this Congress can actually work. Okay, back to you, Congressman.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing on the infrastructure bill. You know, Hawaii and the nation is desperately in need of an infrastructure investment and injection into the nation to address our crumbling bridges, our roads, our aging infrastructure. You know, Hawaii has a D+ when rating our infrastructure, and many of our bridges are already crumbling. Go out to Haleiwa, and there's a bridge out there that you barely can use because the foundations and the footings are in desperate need of repair. So, you know, this, what looks to be, you know, we're really, really close to an infrastructure bill, something that, you know, this is only my first year in Congress, but Congressman Case has been in the House for you know, several years, many years, and he knows how difficult it is to get an infrastructure bill through the House and Senate to the president's desk. And this is the closest we've gotten in many, many years to achieving that. I hope that there are critical components in the Invest in America Act that we sent over to the House that are in the Senate version of the infrastructure bill that looks like they'll pass this weekend. In the Invest in America Act, we, both Congressman Case and I, had an opportunity to specify certain surface transportation projects that are really important for the entire state of Hawaii. Many of those projects were identified on the state's OMPO and the state's transportation infrastructure or investment plan. I don't know the exact acronym, but it's the STIP and the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Plan by the State of Hawaii Department of Transportation. And so everything from the repaving of Wainuinui Avenue here in Hilo to addressing bridges and critical infrastructure, highway transportation projects across the state were in that bill that we sent over to the Senate. And I really hope some of those stay in there and make it in there because they're really important for some of those state identified, you know, federal, state cost share transportation projects that we can get in there. But basically, I fully support the infrastructure bill and looking forward to it coming over to the House and like Congressman Case said, passing it as quick as possible and getting it to the president's desk. Okay, question for me is, let's see, when can Hawaii families see the premium pay for essential workers as part of the American Rescue Plan? What can we do to make this happen? So the American Rescue Plan Act, and thank you for that question, but the American Rescue Plan local fiscal recovery funds may be used to provide premium pay to eligible workers performing essential work during the COVID-19 public health emergency, or to provide grants to third-party employers with eligible workers performing this essential work. These funds were distributed through the American Rescue Plan that the Congress and the President signed into law in March. Those funds were distributed to the governor and to the county mayors. And so it would have been up to those state officials to decide how to distribute these funds, including if they wanted to have premium pay for essential workers. And so I hope that answers your question. If you are eligible for premium pay and it's something that you have not received yet, you know, like Congressman Case said, we often deal with issues that are not directly within our jurisdiction, but we know how to connect you to the appropriate county or state senator or representative that can work together with the administration to get those allocated. And finally, here's another easy question. It's basically, you talked about your field representatives for the rest of the state. but who are your representatives for the second district on the island of Oahu? And so that's a great question. Thank you for that. On the island of Oahu is my Deputy Chief of Staff, Ikaika Mahoe. He is essentially my top representative throughout the entire state of Hawaii. So that would be Ikaika Mahoe. He's on the island of Oahu. And Roz Makaula, who is my communications director, and she is on the island of Oahu as well. You'll frequently see them at neighborhood boards or at community meetings when we go back to in-person meetings. But Ikaika and Roz are my field representatives and my point people on the island of Oahu.
Okay, let's see. Here's a question for me. Will you be willing to raise taxes on the wealthy? That's a very good question, and I think it's one that we all have to face the music on. So let me set the stage for that. We have borrowed over $5 trillion in the last 18 months for COVID-19. 18 months ago, our fiscal situation in our country was already going downhill. We had very, very large annual deficits. So the difference between revenues and expenses in any fiscal year was already some of the largest that we had ever had. And then COVID-19 came along, and our national debt at the beginning, meaning the entire amount of money that is owed by our federal government, so translate by you through our federal government, was somewhere in the range of $23 trillion. And that was a very, very large amount. But take $23 trillion and increase it to over $28 trillion inside of 18 months. Puts our fiscal situation in an even more precarious state. And so personally, I'm not willing to go into any more debt in our country than we have to. COVID-19 was an emergency, and we needed to do that. We needed to stabilize our economy, stabilize our communities, and help those that needed helping. And that was the wrong time to either cut federal programs or increase taxes. While we try to get on our feet again. But hopefully now that we're coming out of COVID-19 and stabilizing, to pretend that we can just go on with massive increases in federal spending without trying at least to return to some fiscal sustainability in our country, I think is perilous and is the wrong decision for us to make, not just for ourselves, but for our children, because I don't want to hand off to my kids a country that is a fiscal wreck. And I don't think we have to. And so we've got to face the music, because the only alternatives then to try to do this in a way that doesn't worsen our debt at the level that we went down the road with COVID-19 is by controlling the spending side and or providing on the revenue side. I think we do have many areas where we can control spending and even reduce in some areas. But the fact of the matter is, we're talking about major infrastructure investments, for example, in the $1 trillion+ category. You're not able to handle that kind of investment in our country by cutting federal programs by $1 trillion somewhere else to increase infrastructure spending. And so you're led back to the revenue side. Now, I didn't support the actions of President Trump some years ago, not that many years ago, to reduce taxes on the most wealthy among us, and also to reduce taxes on corporations, where I thought that the tax rates were adequately set prior to that by both Democratic and Republican presidents and Congresses. And so these were still some of the lowest corporate tax rates since the Second World War. Also on the individual tax side, they were some of the lowest tax rates as well. So it wasn't like they were crushing and destroying economic activity or making it very, very difficult for people to live. I didn't think those tax cuts were necessary, and they weren't warranted. And I think they created inequities in our society that I simply couldn't support as a policy matter. Nonetheless, those tax cuts were instituted, and they contributed to a worsening fiscal situation and to debt. So to me, to simply allow the tax rates to return to where they were before they were reduced by President Trump to rates that again had been sustainable over time is an appropriate thing for us to do. And so, from that perspective, the answer to your question is yes. I am willing to return to tax rates pre-Trump cuts. That would result in an increase in taxes at the very upper income levels and at the corporate tax levels. I would not be willing to do that to a point where it actually does, in fact, start to hinder economic activity. But I do not believe that going back to pre-Trump tax cut levels is going to do that. And I think it's a fair allocation of the responsibilities of our federal government across our society. And I think it is necessary for us to be able to make these reinvestments in our infrastructure and other parts of our economy and society. Over to you, Congressman.
Yeah, I mean, one of the questions I got asked, and it's basically along the lines of what you were talking about, was the question was modest income was taxed higher by the Trump tax cut due to the SALT limitation. I'm okay with that if the very rich are made to pay their fair shares, not zero. And what will be my comments on that? And I couldn't agree with you more that the rich should pay more, and that's why I'm a co-sponsor of the ultra millionaires tax. And this bill will ask the 0.01%, the richest people in this country, to pay their fair share in taxes. This bill would include a 2% annual tax on the net worth of households between $50 million and $1 billion, and a 3% surtax on net worth above $1 billion. At the end of the day, we have a revenue problem in this country, and trickle-down economics has never worked for our country. And the Trump tax cut that cost us $2.3 trillion in revenue was supposed to go to the working class. And in fact, it went to the people in the top 20% of the income ladder. I know so many people who are working class Americans that when they did their tax returns this past year, found that they were paying a lot more in taxes than they were in previous years. And that's because President Trump's tax cut, was a total dud, was a total sham. And, I totally would agree and go back to the pre-Trump tax cuts and or the pre-Trump tax rates, and to go back to where the taxes were for the corporate tax rate and the other tax structures that existed before the Trump tax cut. And so, I agree with you, and I definitely think the rich should pay more, and that's why I'm a proud sponsor of the ultra millionaires tax. So that's my piggybacking on that answer from Congressman Case. Let me go to another question. My business is being threatened. This is from let's see. My business is being threatened by eviction by my landlord, from a good friend of mine, looks like from Jeff Gomes here in Hilo, and he's falling behind on my lease due to the COVID shutdown. Can you help me? Jeff, a lot of people are in your situation as well across the state and across our country. As of right now, the federal government has not issued an eviction moratorium for commercial businesses, and they've only applied that to residential tenants. And so I don't know what Congressman Case will have to say, but I don't think President Biden, nor did President Trump, when he was in office, issue an eviction moratorium for commercial businesses and those that have commercial leases. I will say that the state legislature even attempted to pass a law this past legislative session to protect commercial tenants, and that never even made it out of the Hawaii State Senate. Passed one committee and it died in the House or the Senate Committee on the Judiciary. All of that doesn't help you, and so how can we help? Well, one of the things that our office has been trying to look into is EDIL loans, and if those are still available for those impacted by COVID-19, those loans are managed by the Small Business Administration. But this is a difficult issue, and it's affecting many businesses who are just starting to come back as the economy starts to come back. And so, I'll do whatever I can and to help not just you, Jeff, but tenants across the state who are being impacted because of a loss of revenues due to COVID, to help you stay in your business and stay where you're located, and try and work together with your landlord to do that. There are community organizations throughout the state, depending on your particular circumstances, that I might be able to connect you with. But this is something that is really important to me, and my staff knows how important it is to me. But it doesn't look like there is a state or a federal eviction moratorium for commercial businesses that is in place or will be in place. And so the available, opportunities to help you would reside within the Small Business Administration, or what we can try and do with our community partners out there. But Congressman Case, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think that's the reality, Congressman. The assistance that we tried to provide and did provide across the government was to give small businesses like Jeff's. And by the way, Jeff, I still have your keychain. I really appreciate that. The time that I spent with you, I've always treasured that, and I know the hardship you're going through right now, as so many are throughout the country. I mean, throughout the state. We've tried to make sure that those PPP, those idle loans, as Congressman Kahele referred to, are available to help with your rent, and certainly landlords that receive their own assistance should not be taking that assistance and yet trying to evict tenants in the same breath. That's completely unfair if that's happening. And personally, I've said to many tenants in that situation that if that is happening, let me know and I'll get personally involved, because that is not what was supposed to happen. Depending on what the business is that you are in, there are also other possibilities, shuttered venue grant operators, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund. I know that's not you, Jeff, I don't think, but many others that may be listening. There are very specialized areas of business assistance. And there are a lot of programs out there to help commercial landlord-tenant related disputes get worked out. After all, it is far more preferable from the landlord's perspective to keep tenants in and get them paying again, as opposed to not having anybody in at all. So all I can really offer right here is exactly what Kai just did, which is anybody in the first congressional in that situation, reach out to us, please, and we'll try to help with your own individual situation, because we've been able to help folks out not once we've understood the exact circumstances that they have been under, and each one of them is a little different. Okay, I'm going to go ahead. What are your thoughts on addressing the concern of China as it attempts to spread its influence in the Pacific? What is this so-called Eagle Act? Well, first of all, I spoke to that a little bit in my introductory remarks. China is a major threat to the Indo-Pacific, to our country, and to our world. China's intention is really to supplant the international rules-based order, which is for the most part led to great peace and stability and improvement in the lives of many throughout our world since the Second World War. And it is simply a kind of an international code of conduct under which we will try to address the world's issues and try to resolve the world's disputes. And essentially, China is fine with doing that if it helps their own ambitions, but it's not fine when it doesn't, as happened, for example, in the South China Sea, which China is trying to turn into its own territorial waters. And when that claim went to international arbitration, which the Philippines brought and China lost, China said, it wasn't going to abide by that. So that'll tell you a little bit about what's going on. I know there's people out there that wish China wasn't this way, that wish that somehow think when people like me talk this way, it's overly aggressive. I would like China to be part of the world like anybody else, but you have to be realistic at some point and look at the evidence of what's happening from a human rights perspective, from a democracy perspective, from a buildup of the military perspective, and all kinds of ways. And it all adds up to one thing, and that is that China is something to worry about. Now, we need to respond to that in a number of different ways. Number one, if we don't have a strong national defense capability, then China doesn't really care about us. But if we have a strong national defense capability, then China does have to be concerned about just running, roughshod over much of our part of the world, and so that it has to start there, and Hawaii has a major role to play. But the other area that is really critical is for us to really compete with China in the non-defense sphere. So, in other words, to offer to the world what we have offered for 3 generations now, which is aid where it's needed, humanitarian assistance, education assistance, technological assistance, trade with the world. All of these things help countries like those throughout the Pacific Islands, the Pacific Rim, whether it be our allies like Australia or other countries that are not technically our allies, but we want to work with, like the countries of the Pacific Islands, to include Fiji. And the Blue Pacific Act, which Congressman Kahele referred to earlier, is an attempt to do that in the Pacific Islands to boost up our engagement with countries of the Pacific Islands in areas like the Peace Corps, like the U.S. Agency for International Development, like trade, like helping those countries to secure their maritime regions, their oceans. And these are sometimes referred to as soft power, but it's really, really critical stuff. The Eagle Act is a major bill that has been now brought out of the Foreign Affairs Committee in the House and is coming before the full United States House of Representatives. It stands for ensuring America's global leadership and engagement act. So it's really the Blue Pacific Act, but bigger than just a Blue Pacific Act, to include other countries as well throughout the world. Much of our Blue Pacific Act is in the Eagle Act now, so this is a major effort that we need to continue to try to push through to re-engage in many cases with countries of the world that perhaps feel like we've been taking them for granted for too long. And if they have desperate situations at home and nowhere else to go, China offers them what they often need, but with a lot of conditions, and we don't want to let that happen. Over to you.
Don asked a question about the Second Amendment, specifically if I support the Second Amendment. Yes, I do, Don, but I also believe that communities have the right to be safe from gun violence, and it's why I support common sense gun violence prevention laws like red flag laws, banning ghost guns, supporting gun safety, and enhanced background checks. Thanks for the question.
Okay, Congressman, we're actually kind of running short on time, so I'm gonna do one more for me, and then you do what you want, and then we'll wrap if that's okay.
Okay, sounds good.
All right. Well, I'm going to take one that we started with that we both talked about in the middle, and that I think is the right place to end. This says, "What are your thoughts on mandatory vaccinations now that the governor and the mayors have agreed to have public employees either be vaccinated or submitted to weekly tests?" Let's go back to the facts here. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We are in a worsening part of that pandemic. We have in the prior 2 waves of COVID-19, we didn't have the option of getting ourselves vaccinated. Now, anybody, at least over the age of 12 or over, and under 12 in just a few months can be vaccinated, can be protected largely from COVID-19, and can protect each of us from COVID-19 as well. We also know that folks that choose not to be vaccinated, 98% of the COVID cases that we're seeing today are the folks that are not vaccinated. And I actually got the stats as we were talking of the COVID-19 cases in Hawaii today. 84% of them are us local residents. Only 14% are related in one way, shape, or form to travel and tourism, and many of those are returning residents. 99.5% of deaths from COVID-19 are in the unvaccinated. So it's completely clear that vaccinations do protect from COVID-19, and the more people that are vaccinated, the less we need to worry about COVID-19 returning or going back to where we were just a few months ago. Now, sometimes people say, "Well, what about the risk?" And I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. The disclosures on the vaccinations do not give anybody 100% assurance of no side effects. But the clear evidence now at this point, given the millions of vaccinations given, is that whatever effects there are very, very minimal, and in many cases very mild. But I would ask you the basic question: what is the risk to you of the vaccination, of getting vaccinated and thereby getting protected, comparing that risk to the risk of getting COVID-19? We know that COVID-19 is a very terrible situation to be in with long-term effects. So I would say that risk is worth it under the circumstances. Now, take it from a mandatory perspective. First of all, when you use the word mandatory, I think what you are saying is that your government is going to show up at your door with a needle and force you to put it in your arm. Nobody has said that. Nobody has said that. And no, there is no initiative to do that. But is it fair to expect somebody that works in a public place, who is in a public place, to either be vaccinated to protect him or herself and everybody else in that space, and or if they don't want to get vaccinated, to be tested to make sure that they're negative for COVID-19 on a very frequent basis? Let's talk about guards in prisons. Let's talk about service members on an aircraft carrier. Let's talk about teachers in a school. I think that is a reasonable thing for us all to expect at this point, and we have to go in that direction, because otherwise we're not going to be able to get to the point where COVID-19 is not infecting over 600 of us every day, and right here in Hawaii. So my answer to you is that I support the initiatives from the president, the governor, and the mayors to require either vaccinations or frequent tests in many parts of at least the workplace, as a condition of going into that workplace. But no, I don't support anybody forcing you to, against your will, to get vaccinated. Although I think you should get vaccinated, and I have been vaccinated, as has my family. Over to you.
Okay, I want to tie it up with three things, and I'll do two questions that I think are really important. One of them has to do with healthcare. A question was, having access to quality health insurance is critical, particularly for cancer patients and survivors. I'm so happy that Congress increased subsidies earlier this year so that more people can better afford marketplace plans. 4 out of 5 people can now buy a plan for less than $10 a month. However, I know those expanded subsidies are scheduled to end in 2022. The question is, would you support making these expanded subsidies permanent so that more people have access to affordable, comprehensive health insurance? Thank you for that question. My answer is yes. And in fact, I am willing to go further. I believe that healthcare is a human right, not a privilege, and it's why I am a strong supporter and co-sponsor of Medicare for all. One of the things that is coming before the U.S. House and is a priority issue for healthcare for the Progressive Caucus is three things. One, lowering the age of Medicare so that more people can get Medicare at an earlier age. The second thing is, and we must absolutely do this, and that is to allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drug prices with the pharmaceutical industry, just like our TRICARE and military healthcare program and systems are able to negotiate and set those drug prices for prescription drugs. And the third thing is to include dental and vision into those healthcare plans. And so these are things that are really important. I hope we can accomplish them in this Congress. But expanding healthcare to every American in this country so that it is accessible to everyone is something that I'm a big proponent of. Will we get there in 117th Congress in terms of Medicare for all? I just don't think the numbers are there right now for that, but it doesn't mean we can't keep talking about it and keep educating people about really what that means. And hopefully, through advocacy and hard work, we can get there one day. Second thing I want to talk about is the here on Hawaii Island. Someone asked about the Hawaii Island brush fires and what has my office done for the working together with the county to address the brush fires in Waikiki and Pu'ukapu and Waikoloa Village. First of all, my office had a in-person representative in the Hawaii County Emergency Management Agency from this weekend, working together with local firefighters, the military at Pohakuloa, community volunteers, and other agencies to address the fires that were very destructive and could have been very, very much more destructive had those fires reached the village of Waikoloa. But beyond that, we've been working together in the last 48 hours with the USDA and working on the disaster assistance programs. We're looking to host a community town hall with the USDA as early as Monday so that we can make sure that people can get that were affected by the fire can get that disaster assistance programs. We're also working together with some of the ranches and individuals that lost livestock or have or lost grazing areas so that we can move those affected cattle to other areas so that they can graze. And so we're really working hard right now. And I just want to mahalo everyone in the county of Hawaii and the firemen and the families and individuals that worked really hard to put those fires out. And there are still fires in this area. It's about 95% put out, but it's not 100% put out. And there are people still up there right now working to put those fires out. So I just want to mahalo everyone for your hard work through the course of the weekend. And the final thing I want to talk about, Congressman Case talked about the mandatory vaccinations and COVID-19. I'm going to circle back to COVID-19, and I want to just quickly address the eviction moratorium for renters. There are two things happening right now. There is a federal eviction moratorium that has been extended by the CDC for those tenants that qualify, and that has been extended to October 3rd. There's some confusion in regards to what localities and areas qualify or don't qualify. There's a pretty complicated metrics to figure that out. Part of it is looking at the 7-day case rate and the nucleic acid positivity rates. But what I can tell you is that my office has been in touch with the CDC, and that they have advised us, the Centers for Disease Control has advised my office that every county in the state of Hawaii qualifies. We have not received that in writing yet as of tonight, Thursday night, but verbally they have conveyed, the CDC has conveyed that every county in the state of Hawaii will qualify under the federal eviction moratorium that has been extended to October 3rd, if you qualify. And so part of it is looking at that 19-page CDC document to determine if you qualify. But we haven't received it in writing yet, but the CDC has verbally conveyed that to myself. The second piece is Governor Ige's state eviction moratorium, which ends this weekend. That is separate from the federal eviction moratorium. So there may be individuals that would have qualified for the eviction moratorium under the state eviction order that may not qualify this weekend when that eviction order comes to an end. And my office is working, has reached out to the governor's office to figure out, one, is extending that eviction moratorium at the state side of the house, something the governor would consider to align with the federal eviction moratorium that is now extended to October 3rd, again, for those that qualify. But more importantly is how can we get the American Rescue Plan federal funding that we appropriated to the states and county governments to the tune of about $120 million that as of just a few weeks ago, less than $4 million has been allocated or distributed per the U.S. Department of Treasury. And so, what is more important to me is that our state and our county governments are able to distribute those federal funds for rental relief for tenants, and more importantly, to make sure that landlords are made whole from rent that has not previously been paid because of the COVID-19 pandemic. So I know it's a question that we're asking at the federal level is how can we help get the counties and states to expedite the releasing of those funds and so that we can make landlords whole and make sure that tenants can continue to stay in their homes. Right now, with the Delta variant, ravaging the country and COVID-19 cases at the highest levels they've ever been, this is not the time to be putting people out on the street and to be evicting people. What we need to do is push as much money out before the moratorium ends and to keep people in their homes. We don't want people going out into areas that have high rates of COVID. We don't want them living in communities or in areas where they're crowded or there's high congregation areas, shared living areas, or in a worst case scenario, an unsheltered, homeless or houseless situation. So, that's my update as far as the eviction moratorium, and I wanted to make sure that was clear. Congressman Case, back to you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. First of all, I just want to endorse everything that Congressman Kahele just said about the eviction moratorium. I think he described it exactly right. And unfortunately, his descriptions includes a fair bit of uncertainty as we have all had to deal with confusion over the last couple of days, stretching into last week. I think the main thing I would say to everybody in addition is simply call us, contact us if you have any questions. We'll try to get you the answers. If we don't have them, we'll tell you. But we can at least try to answer your individual questions. And so on that note, I will have my closing remarks and then turn it back to you, Kai, to close it. It's been a great honor to continue to represent you in the 117th Congress. It is a very, very difficult Congress, as you know, because of COVID-19 and the many other issues that we face. But the bottom line is we're still here as your two U.S. representatives. We're still here to try to help our country with the national issues that we need to contribute to sound national decisions, whether it be in our country or overseas. We're still here to try to make sure our federal government works for us here in Hawaii, whether it be appropriations or anything else. And we are still here to help you with your individual concerns. And all of that takes us staying in touch with you. This is one way that we try to stay in touch with you. We hope you learned something and perhaps had some appreciation of what we are all about in our jobs on your behalf. Many of the questions I don't think were answered. I have a couple left on my list, but still, please contact me through case.house.gov. That's the easiest way, case.house.gov. To send in your questions, we'll get them answered, or to ask for whatever follow-up you think is needed, or to ask for our assistance. And so with that, I thank you for listening tonight, and I'll turn it over to my colleague.
Same here. All our time tonight has come to an end. I really appreciate Congressman Case and the opportunity to, partner with you and be your partner in the House. I also want to thank both of our staffs for putting this town hall together, working behind the scenes to make it happen. And as you mentioned, we weren't able to answer every single question there. But what I can promise every individual that made a comment is we're going to go through every single one of your comments. We're going to pull your question out. At least, I'm sure Congressman Cases' office will as well. I don't want to speak for him, but we will go through all of your comments. We will turn those into questions, and we will do our best to respond to you. I guess we would just need the email to respond to. So if you can send an email to our office tonight, and you can just put your email on there, and we'll be happy to respond to you. But you can also contact our district office in Hilo at 808-746-6220. If you can leave your first name, your last name, say you made a comment, and leave your email address, then that's probably the best way that we can get back to you. Again, I want to say mahalo nui loa to everyone that joined this town hall tonight, and I look forward to doing more of these. And I just thanks so much, Congressman Case, and for all of you that shared this evening with us, and to everybody that tuned in online. Again, thank you so much for giving us your time this evening. And I look forward to hopefully seeing you in person one day at a community town hall meeting, or on another talk story that we'll do maybe sometime this fall. So thank you so much. And I guess, what is it, 8:12 in the evening, and I'm going to jump onto the Kaiali'i Neighborhood Board, and hopefully they haven't got to the agenda item yet, and I can give my legislative update for the Kaiali'i Neighborhood Board. But again, thank you so much, everyone, and mahalo nui loa, and stay safe out there, and aloha.
Aloha.